welcome back to the shed. I'm Joe Bleeps, and this video is a companion piece to my new Gameboy Macro video. There is a part of that process that I spent a long time trying to find information about. When you position the speaker in a certain place with the Gameboy Macro, sometimes that can engage the sleep mode, and it took me quite a while to figure out how to disable that. I couldn't find any other guides elsewhere, so that's what you've got here. If you want to find out more about Gameboy Macros in general, then do check out my other video. However, if you are already familiar with those and you've encountered this problem, then I'm hoping this video will help you out. If you want to check out the other video, I'll try and remember to link it up here. But in the meantime, enjoy, and I hope this is useful. So Gameboy Macro, in case you didn't know, is essentially the bottom half of a Nintendo DS Lite. Now the top half, like the one I've got here, originally had the top screen and two speakers. So if you remove that, you also lose the speaker functionality. So I've positioned a speaker in the back. So I removed all the stylus assembly and put the speaker in there. That's wired up to the left and right signal as well. So all the sounds coming out of there. It's going to be fairly quiet, but it does the job. Now, the problem is when I switch on, it will come on, it will briefly flash on the screen, and then it will go off. What you want to look at here is, look at the green light there. Okay, that's intermittently flashing. Now what's happening there is the macro isn't faulty, it's going into sleep mode. Okay, so let's take a look at the original DS. When you switch on the DS, the green light comes on, it powers up, the screens come on, and you hear the sound and so on. But when we're not playing and we close it, it partially powers down. It goes into this sleep mode, and to indicate that, there you go, you see the same thing's happening. The green LED is coming on and going off. Now, the issue with that is that, well, it's not an issue in this case, it's a clever feature. And the way it works is there's a magnetic sensor that's in the unit here. So as we close it and the speaker comes into position around here, the magnetic sensor detects it and shuts down the unit. And if you've positioned your speaker here, then that is kind of in the vicinity of that sensor. And if it's just a couple of millimeters up or down or whatever, if it's near there, that can happen. It is quite common if you're making these Gameboy Macros with the speaker in that position. You don't have to rip out the speaker, you don't have to move it, because that spot there is actually really handy. It's an opening that you might otherwise have to fill, and in this case we can make a feature of it. So there is another workaround. What I'm going to show you here is how you can get it so that it doesn't drop into sleep mode. We're going to disable that magnetic sensor that's on the motherboard. So I'm just going to open up the unit first. Okay, so that's the back of it there. I'll just move the shell parts out of the way and we'll have a look at this speaker. Okay, so I've got the speaker glued in place here. I've actually found it's a really good position to have it, where you can just about access the screw here, but it's below there's like a line marked off where it says D4 on the motherboard, and that line, if you position the speaker just below it, it fits within the shell, provided you have trimmed out and removed the stylus assembly, and there's a little bit of Dremel work to remove a screw post and some of these bits to flatten off. Once that's done, you've got room for the speaker to sit in place. Okay, so my speaker has been hot glued on there. I'll just pick it up carefully by the screen, and if I flip over, you'll see where you've got the A, B, X and Y buttons. In the middle, you've got what's marked as U11. Now that is what actually controls the sleep mode. So what we need to do is remove that and then short out the top 2 points. And what that will do is make it so that it disables the sleep mode. So you can have a magnet anywhere near this area and it won't work. Okay, so if you were to do that in a DS, it would be pointless because it would remove the sleep mode, which is actually quite useful. But on a macro, it is worth getting rid of that. So that's what we're going to do next. And all we need to do is, I'll just get it into position here, and I find if you heat the solder on the lower pin while you try and lift it with some tweezers, that tends to lift it off. If it won't come off, well, it's actually handy to do. It seems to go against logic, but if you've got a little bit of extra solder on the tip of your soldering iron, so it'll let everything flow that little bit more. That lifts off there. And then you do the same on the other side, and you just keep doing that until you can remove that little component. There we go, that's lifted off there. A bit off the other side. So if you lift it on these 2 pins first, it doesn't matter if the other one breaks off. The top 2 are your important ones. That's off. Just clean up the solder that's left behind. Make sure we've got a fresh little blob on each of those points. My next job is to get some wire. Any wire is fine. Just stripped a little bit off the end of that, which was from one of the speakers in the DS. Melt some solder onto it to tin it. Although you're going to end up with a small part on here, it's easier to do with a bigger piece in place like this. At the end, at that point. Make sure they're both together, and basically you've shorted out those 2 points. So there we go, that's the wire in place there, and all I need to use now is some snips to just trim the end of that wire off. It's often difficult to get in there, and you don't want to pull off again those contacts, so you just lift the wire. There we go, so that's done, and it's removed the component, and we've shorted out those 2 points. That will go back in, so I'll assemble the whole thing all over again, and we'll see how that affects it. Right, so that's all back together again, and I was so confident it's going to work. I've even put the little rubber caps back over where the screws go. So let's try switching it on and see what happens. There we go. So if you've built your own Gameboy Macro in the past maybe, or you've recently built one and you're having problems with it dropping into sleep mode, that is your issue. I've looked online and I never found a solution. I ended up figuring that one out myself. So if there are other similar solutions out there, then I was too dumb to find those, but I was clever enough to figure this out, I guess. I don't know. But if you've been finding it difficult, then hopefully this guide will be useful for you. And it's time to set up my Macro and go and do a little bit of gaming. So that's it. It's simply a case of removing one surface mounted component and then replacing that with a little bit of wire to connect 2 points, and it will disable the sleep feature. It'll mean you can position your speaker wherever you want, and it won't hamper you in terms of your designs of the layout of how you're going to put together your Gameboy Macro. So I hope that was useful. If you've tried it out, or if there's any other methods that you've found elsewhere, let me know in the comments. But in the meantime, happy modding, and I'll see you next time. Bye.